Hello, Modern here, today with my thoughts on the endgame of last Epoch, and how it translates to the game becoming boring as you hit up monoliths and grind them out. Yes, they are unfinished, and will get more diverse with the upcoming patches, since the devs promised us they are working on improving them. But the issues at hand are far more wide-reaching, and need more than just a bit of variety sprinkled into the mix through random events, or much bigger and densely spread mob packs. Don't get me wrong, those are issues that need to be addressed, but I personally see more problems with the endgame. This includes the dungeons, but I will talk about them at the very end. I will start with map design and flow of movement first. RPGs always feature repetitive designs, so I don't see an issue with that. Players doing the same stuff for the millionth time is quite normal, be it in Diablo 2 with ball runs or PoE with juiced up specific maps you like to run over and over again. Grinding it out lies at the core of this genre. The problem I see is with how maps are designed in this game, in combination with the limited availability of movement speed and the inability to cross even small gaps with abilities like teleport. Running a monolith often results in you backtracking, or running big laps to complete objectives. This is especially bad for patrolling foes that run away from you. There are too many roadblocks, impassable walls, lakes, or other topographic features that are frustrating to encounter and interrupt the flow of clearing an objective. Maps are often just too big for their own good, and quickly become anemic to run. Alpine halls immediately comes to mind, but there are many others that have the same problem, especially older ones. Next, let's move to the objectives this game throws at you. To make it quick, I think they are unfit to be something you want to have in an ARPG. Additionally, there is not enough objectives overall, leaving us with spires and patrolling enemies most of the time. I'm here to rampage through hordes of monsters, not skip most of the map just to kill one stationary, boring spire, or chase multiple foes running away from me all the time. Now I will go into spires first. They are just boring, punish you heavily on stationary and slow moving builds, and feel exactly the same every single time. No matter which element is thrown at you, they all do nearly the exact same thing, with some paint thrown over them. Why is the necrotic one not just summoning enemies? Why is the fire one not spawning patches of fiery ground? Why is the ice one not just CCing us with freeze? They all feature the same mechanic: damage us. But besides that, they also encourage us to blast through maps, while skipping most of the packs. Standing still to fight them is dangerous and doesn't contribute anything to the end reward. I think that's just a poor design choice for an ARPG. Now the same is true for patrolling enemies. Standing still to fight foes just results in them moving further away from you, prolonging the time you spend in the monolith without getting to the end rewards. Bonus points for multiple of them running into opposite directions, so you have to backtrack the whole map. The other two regular objectives are kind of okay, with gates at least spawning waves of monsters to fight, but they still make you rush to them. Same with their mini-bosses, which are by far the best ones and the rarest to encounter for some odd reason. All that is made even more tedious with some objectives not being revealed right away. There are two problems with this. The first one is when you run into a completely different direction and have to backtrack half the empty map. The second one is when the map is nearly empty with no pack size and packs being really far apart. This makes revealing objectives really tedious and is the only time you want to kill stuff. Otherwise, all endgame objectives make you ignore the maps and monsters contained within them. They incentivize you to skip all there is to get to the end, and nothing will change that. Having side objectives scattered around the large map will never be worth going for if they are not equally or even more rewarding than the main objective. Like I already mentioned, maps already feel anemic to run. This just elevates the problem. Moving on, the actual grid type reward system in the monoliths is actually a refreshing take on the whole genre. It's great for target farming stuff, and I never feel cheated out of an opportunity. However, they have a different problem entirely. The rewards are just bland. Everything feels the same. You always get loot at the end, but everything feels no different to the previous rewards. Now, to really grasp what I mean, let me give you an example for changes and additions. The first one being runes and glyphs. Having a reward node for a specific one would be too strong, and would also result in a bloat of nodes in the monoliths. But what about having 3 chests at the end instead of one floating blob? Each one contains a set of glyphs or runes of a specific type, but you can only pick one. Each rune and glyph node would feel different, and it would avoid bloating the grid with unnecessary nodes. Another example would be the affix node. Being offered the choice between different types like belt, chest or weapon affixes would go a long way in making the node feel different each time. Now let's look at the next issue. you, character progression, or progression altogether. The monolith is designed as an infinitely scaling endgame system, but you are not. You stagnate, passives and skills are front-loaded, and you get access to most of the powerful stuff around the midpoint of your progression. I never feel like I must choose between passives on any build. I'm decked around level 90 with basically everything I want. My skills are also maxed. Blessings only provide you with uninteresting stat increases, which are grinded out really fast. One choice is always locked in crit avoidance, so there are only 4 choices to make up for power, with 5 blessings not mattering for your character. Legendaries do address this problem a bit, but you cannot realistically equip them into every gear slot. Rare items outperform most at 1, 2 or even 3 LP. Some even lose at 4 LP because of the lost implicit modifier of the base item. It just feels tedious and boring to grind for a bit more crits, health or increased damage. There is nothing big to work towards. With no special affixes or item bases unlocked at higher corruption levels, there are no new bosses, idols, special crafting scrolls, runes or unique reward nodes on the web. There is nothing of interest here. It's just boring. This needs to be desperately fixed. Variety needs to be added in terms of progressing your character. This can be quite simple, like adding special corrupted bases, idols or affix shards after reaching 300C. Maybe something that comes with exceptionally powerful effects, but also features drawbacks. Or affixes that occupy 2 slots instead of 1, but offer double the effect. Bases with 1 prefix or 3 suffixes. Idols that feature other forms like an L or a T. Anything to make the grind more interesting. Because oh boy, does the grind get stale. I personally just do not see the point of grinding out characters for too long. Nothing really changes once you have your puzzle pieces together early on. Everything is the same. You do not unlock anything to improve your character, to enhance your build. This is supposed to be a seasonal game with players going at it for multiple weeks or even months. At the moment, I cannot really see how they are going to accomplish this with the amount of depth available. I do not want a massive skill tree like PoE. It is confusing and discouraging to newer players. But something later that's class unspecific might elevate the problem. They could just scrap the whole blessing system and add blessing points for completing timelines at specific difficulties, like 0, 100, 200, 300, 400, that you could spend on a blessing board similar to Grim Dawn's devotion board. I would still want to complete bosses for specific uniques and at specific thresholds, but I could space it out a bit more and diversify into other timelines to spice things up. All 10 would be relevant. The whole gameplay loop of resetting your monolith for corruption and filling up a bar to kill a monolith boss is just very uninteresting to begin with. You also have little to no control over the difficulty, with some mods being absolutely insane due to the multiplicative nature of corruption. They're roadblocks. I would much rather have fixed corruption milestones than an infinitely scaling grid. This would open up the game to a better feel of progression and better balancing. Something that's also requested quite often is the ability to pick a lower corruption level than the current one without losing the higher level. I personally would really like to see this. Changing your build is very easy in this game and is the primary reason I keep playing, but pushing into 300 plus on some builds requires exceptionally good gear, so I'm stuck with leveling another character. Which brings me to the last topic regarding monoliths: alternate characters. Progressing through normal into empowered ones to get into the real endgame is some of the most tedious and draining process I have ever experienced in an ARPG. I think it's not that bad on the first character, but multiple over multiple seasons, like 2, 3, 4 or even 5 characters, pain. The actual main story is no problem. It's great actually, and I enjoy playing through it. But as soon as I hit monoliths, death. And I'm not going into arenas, because arenas are just exceptionally boring. Now I proposed a solution to this already. Completing basic monoliths on the first character of a season would unlock basic points for all characters. This would free up the leveling section a bit, and I would just pick a specific monolith, arena or even dungeon to grind my character to empowered monoliths without the need to burn myself out during leveling. I know they will most likely never implement something like this, but they have to do something about those issues. Otherwise I do not see this game thriving as a seasonal ARPG. And lastly, dungeons. I personally think they are great. Each one has their own unique reward, theme, boss and mechanic. The mob density is great, monsters actually drop loot, and you can take your time and farm it out if you really want to, because doors modify the loot enemies drop in a specific run. However, they are not entirely without issues. The biggest problem I have with them is length. More specifically, they feel too short. There is no way to get more floors to burn through, which is a bummer. Each floor comes with doors that modify the monster's stats stats and loot, and that's a great system that incentivizes players to kill everything they see. However, it's over really fast and I barely get to enjoy it. I would just like to have longer versions of dungeons. Options with 5 or even 10 more floors to rampage through in exchange for more keys would be perfect. Now each dungeon type has their own issues I want to mention and talk about. Starting with the Temporal Sanctum. The layout is actually great, but the changing gate structure in the dungeon is not. EHG wanted to randomize the layout of each run, so they opted for the easiest way out with closing off paths. Those change with every single run. For this, I would much rather have them create more designs and throw them in as static mazes. Just start with 2 or 3 and throw more and more in there to make it feel randomized. Next is the Soulfire Bastion. You go in, beat up as much stuff as possible and leave with good loot at the end. I want more of that. Preferably me beating stuff up for direct, immediate drops of dopamine inducing loot on a nice, intimate, relatively compact map with big juicy packs of mobs. Now this dungeon is nearly there, but has a lot of corridors which slow you down. You also need to run up to each pact so you can suck up a glowing orb used as currency for the gambler at the very end. Just add the currency right away and streamline the layout a bit. This dungeon has potential to be the best piece of content in the game. Currently, it's just not. And the last one, Lightless Arbor. I personally really like the layout, visuals and mob types in this dungeon. Add random events in here, give me more doors to scale loot and let me go blasting. The fire gimmick for the last boss is a bit anemic, but it is over relatively fast. And the fight inside the gigantic boy is exceptionally well designed and one of my favorites in this game. But where's the issue here? The rewards at the end. You need to grind a lot of gold to go ham here, which makes you just farm boring monos for cash over and over again. This takes a lot of time and I would much rather see something to gain more gold in dungeons. But once you get to open the vault, dopamine explosion. The loot is absolutely amazing. And one more thing, Lagoon is broken and has been for years. Please fix that one. Now to sum everything up in a TLDR. Decrease the map sizes. Make maps flow better with movement skills interacting with the Z-axis. Decrease roadblocks, dead ends and impassable terrain. Increase mob and pack density. Give us other objectives. Make them interact with monsters and the map to prevent skipping. Improve rewards for completing monoliths to not feel samey. Increase the reward variety for completing monoliths. Improve and expand character progression in the endgame with, for example, new bases, affixes, blessing points and more. Whatever you come up with. Overhaul the monolith progression for all seasons and new characters. Give us options to expand dungeons with more floors. As for the Temporal Sanctum, static dungeon maps would probably feel better. As for the Soulfire Bastion, scrap the special currency drops, just add them immediately. And something that's not entirely specific to the Lightless Arbor, but for all dungeons, give me more options to earn gold in dungeons. For example, through introducing dungeon specific events. And overall, just give me more stuff to kill for dopamine inducing loot drops. There's too much objective based gameplay in this game. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the endgame in Last Epoch. If you want to see more of this for Last Epoch and other games like Diablo 4, MMORPGs or isometric titles, make sure to leave a like, sub and comment. If you want to support me some more, make sure to check out my Patreon, PayPal and channel membership. See you next time and bye.